Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third Project Spotlight interview here with Wade Fletcher from UndercoverVC. I am Danny Marquez.
And hi, guys. I'm Isaiah Sparkman. Wade, I would just first of all like to thank you so much for being here today. You've got a lot of great things going on concerning UndercoverVC and what you're doing over at your university and beyond. But before we get into that, how is Wade doing today?
I'm doing well. It's certainly a Sunday scaries kind of day. I am currently in the Potbelly sandwich shop where I've been posted up since like 10 a.m. Working on finance homework, some CS homework later this afternoon, and having lots of phone calls like this.
So a double major lifestyle, huh?
I guess so, yeah.
Awesome. So in 1 to 2 minutes, Wade, could you give us a little background about you? You mentioned the field that you're studying, but could you give us a little background on why you chose finance and CS? Just give us a little bit of your overview of like your work experience so far as well.
Yeah, so I came out of high school, and kind of by about my junior year of high school, I knew pretty certainly I want to do computer science and finance in college. And those are two things I'm interested in, and the intersection of those is interesting to me. Those are the two things I want to study. And when I went to apply to college, there are a lot of fantastic programs for CS and finance. Penn has an M&G program, Texas has CSB. All those require you to be like a perfect and then some student in high school. And all through high school, I was running some kind of scheme. I was, drop shipping 3D printer products or writing code for Ticket Scalper, like all kinds of crazy stuff that I was doing at the expense of my high school grades. And so I got to apply to college, and those programs were really out of reach for me. But IU gave me a situation in which, while IU does not have a dual degree program formally, I could build it myself using credit that I'd gotten from high school and get everything done in 4 years. So that's how I ended up at IU, and I've had a fantastic time here. Obviously, a good enough business school and a pretty good CS program that have made that a good time for me. To summarize, my professional experience has been reasonably broad. Maybe not that much, nothing crazy. But after my senior year of high school, I did 2 internships that were across the street from each other. I did one in the morning and across the street, then another in the afternoon. The first one was with a company called Wallach Investments, one of my absolute favorite internships to date. That's RIA, my hometown, just doing like traditional investment management stuff. Specifically, what I was doing was using those CS skills to automate parts of my boss's job. So he had to pull data from these 5 sources and plug them into this spreadsheet every morning to figure out what they needed to buy and sell that day. That was a process I created the script to automate. And then in the afternoons, I went to the State House and worked for the state treasurer, which was a much more like typical coffee run intern kind of deal, where I literally made copies and stapled things and picked up lunch and coffee. And it was very, very much a different vibe, but both were fantastic experiences. At my first year of college, not super eventful, except for COVID happens in March of 2020, as we all know. And I went home, lounged around for a few weeks, got school done, and then once we were getting kind of inching towards the start of the summer, maybe towards the end of May, I started realizing oh shoot, I'm gonna need an internship or something to do this summer, or this is gonna be a ridiculously boring time for me. And I thought, at this point in the game, my best option is going to be a CS internship, because all the business internships already had offer signs last July and August. But I could probably find something remote in CS. So I need a really good portfolio project, and I need to meet a bunch of recruiters as fast as possible. And I said, well, how do you do that? Well, let's build a jobs board, and that'll give me a pretext to contact a bunch of recruiters. So I built this thing called CovIntern that was a highly curated jobs board of remote internships for that COVID period that were still open in March. But I did that by LinkedIn messaging and emailing a lot of recruiters saying, hey, I built this thing. I would love to have whatever opportunities you still have available posted on it, which again gave me a pretext to talk to them and create this useful product. Built the site itself in about 4 days, like really quick and dirty. The first version of it that I shipped is the ugliest website I've ever built, easily. If you imagine like caution tape as an aesthetic, that's about what it was. It's a lot of yellow and white, very, very nasty.
What you used to build it? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that was Django on Heroku, like very quick and dirty, simple Bulma for the front end, which is like ancient now. It was kind of ancient then. But so I built that and posted it on LinkedIn and thought like 40 of my friends and you will see this, maybe your recruiter or two will see this, so and it'll do something for me. And it went nuts. Like it was, people talk about like finding product market fit. I think in that case, product market fit found me. And that post did in the first week like 100,000 views, and then snowballed up from there towards 1 million. And was driving traffic to the site, and it got picked up and then the press off the virality of this LinkedIn post picked it up, and so then I was did an interview with MarketWatch and was in Morning Brew and some other places. And then college and university career centers picked it up, and that's when it really went nuts. When like 60 college and career centers across the country were recommending this site as like, this is the place you should go to find an internship.
Wow. And
so this website grew over that first maybe 2 months. 2 months might be a little much, probably 6 weeks or so, to about 120,000 users. That I was then like, it literally in my parents' house. I worked on this thing. I would sleep from like 6 to 8 a.m. to like 3 in the afternoon, and then get up and like work on this from like 5 p.m. to 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh wow.
And then it was COVID. Like nobody had any schedule. I didn't have any boss to answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, but built that, and yeah, you grew to about 120,000 users.
And all that happened in like 6 weeks.
And that happened in like 6 weeks. Yeah, it's honestly still gets a surprising amount of not a lot, like nothing to say anything about. But I've been surprised at how consistently it's continued to get traffic since then, even though it like is a ghost town that hasn't been updated in months. But from there I did get an internship. This is turning into a very long story, I know. Did get an internship with an organization called URX. I built the first prototype of a product called Talent Board. Our idea there was, let's take, so when you apply to college, you take the SAT and you take the SAT once, and that same score, because all the colleges are looking for roughly the same thing, is the score you take and put on your application to 5 or 10 or however many schools you apply to. When you're doing early career software recruiting for CS internships and graduate full-time positions, you have to take basically the same little coding challenge for every company you apply to, and it takes like an hour or two for each company. And the companies have to pay per test they give a few dollars to a testing provider. And we said, okay, well, we don't want to waste all these students' time. We don't want to waste all these companies' money. Can we just create a standard test that a CS major would take once and then have a score that's valid at a bunch of different companies? And so we did exactly that. That's the product I built over that summer. We rolled that out at the end of the summer with some cool companies. Who are the big ones? Facebook uses it. Robinhood uses it. Cloudera uses it. A bunch of Greylock and their portfolio companies use it.
Yeah.
A bunch of cool companies are using that. It's called Talent Board. So that name came after me. It was just a common app when I was building it. But did that summer. That was a lot of fun. And I got to the end of that summer and I realized I really like doing CS stuff. But in the same way, there's a difference between like painting an oil picture and painting a house. I really liked doing those little fun, kind of artistic, what I wanted to do personal projects. I didn't like nearly as much, painting somebody else's house, implementing somebody else's product idea to their specifications and everything. And I realized CS probably went for me, but I had gotten through kind of that Greylock connection, and the guy who started URX had just recently left Andrews and Horowitz. I had kind of gotten some funny exposure to the venture world over that summer, and I was kind of like, this might be the intersection of technology and finance that's more agreeable to me than the things I've tried. I did investment management out of high school. Now I've done pure CS. Where in the middle was for me. I decided venture might be worth a try. And so I started emailing like student venture organizations. I won't name them, but you know who they are. I said, hey, I'm Wade. I'm a student in Indiana. I'd love to be a part of your deal. And I got emails back that basically said, like, Wade, we think you're a cool guy, but we're not so sure on whether the Indiana ecosystem can support an investment partner at this time. And I said, okay, well, that's kind of interesting because I know that there are startups coming out of IU that are getting funded. And I know there are funds that would love to invest in IU startups a little earlier than graduation. I think I can make something happen here. And I bet there are a lot of universities around the country that are exactly the same way. And if, because of their notions of prestige and who they wanted to be and who they didn't want to be, and if you're going to miss out on that opportunity for silly reasons, then that's something I can really capture. And so I set out with my roommate. Actually, we said, okay, we're gonna raise a venture fund. We're gonna go write $20,000 checks into really early student founders. And we made it, I think, like 3 days before we were like, wait a minute, we are two 18-year-olds with no background in venture, no background in startups. Nobody smart is giving us a dime. And so we rearranged it, and I found my best friend from like the 7th grade. I just looked him up on LinkedIn out of the blue one day. Like, what is this kid doing? Looked him up on LinkedIn. And he was in Singapore working for a venture fund and had been for like 6 months. Yeah. And so Austin, so we called up Austin and we caught up on what had happened in the last 10 years, not 10 years, 6 years, however long. And I said, I'm working on this idea. We'd love to have you be a part of it. And it's like, I'm in, let's do it. And so we set out with this new model of, instead of raising capital ourselves, we're going to go out and find the capital that wants to access students. And we think as students, our competitive advantage that we can do that professional investors can't do is we know how to find students and talk to students and get students to apply to these programs, participate. And so we put together this model of, we're going to go out to funds that want to invest in students, sign them up, go find students on campuses that don't have exposure from other venture funds and organizations. And then we're going to be the deal flow pipe between those funds that want to invest in students and those students that can find the deals. And so we launched this thing called UndercoverVC that was building this network from both sides. We grew, so we ran 2 full cohorts over the course of about a year and a half. Over that period, we had about 50 students through the program on 25, the actual number is like 28 or something, but like 25 roughly campuses. And then we worked with 15 funds with, I think, 1.2 billion in assets under management, building that deal flow pipeline. In those 2 cohorts, it was just not enough time to get a deal all the way through to completion. So we're still waiting on that. But we did have some cool success stories. So one thing we figured out was a lot of these student founders are just a little too early. So like 80% of our pipeline was a little too early for us to feel good about taking to our investors yet, but we could get them there. And so we built this platform team, and I got my friend Jack at Northeastern who run this. And basically what they did is they would just get on with founders every 2 weeks and check in on almost like a very, very loose accelerator. Check in, where are you at? Let's take a look at your pitch deck. Go ahead and send us that. We'll write up some feedback on it. And we really helped them workshop their pitch materials, workshop their value proposition, and get to somewhere that we were comfortable bringing to our investors. One of the teams we did that with was a company that at the time was called Pet Code, is now called Auto Pets, I think. That when we met them, they were like 16-year-old high schoolers, and now they were in the first cohort of the On Deck Accelerator and doing some crazy cool stuff and like crazy numbers. Those are On Deck has this idea of like belief capital. It's like when you invest in somebody for them on the belief that whatever they're going to do, they're going to do something well. I absolutely would have, if I had $5,000 to give them, I absolutely would have made a tiny little angel check into that company. Because while I don't know the most about the pet world, and I haven't fully researched that, I know that team is excellent, impressive, and I would love to invest in them. And then our second one is, if y'all are in the crypto space, in the DAO space, Utopia Labs was founded by Kaito Cunningham pretty shortly after he went through the UndercoverVC program. And obviously we can't take any credit for that because we don't do anything with crypto. But I called him up after that first cohort and said, Kaito, I'd love to have you on our team to bring this to the next cohort and just continue to grow this. He was like, I'm kind of working on this little crypto thing with my friends, probably going to do something in crypto. We'll see what happens. And then, like 2 months later, he announces he's raised $1.5 million to build this crypto startup. But I say that to say, like, while we, in the 2 cohorts I led, didn't get a traditional deal to completion done out of it, we absolutely met some cool people. The alumni network is absolutely strong and has really paid dividends for me and the other people in it. I know you talked to, in a previous episode issue, I'm not sure what you call them in this, talked to Adam Folsom and Emily Kist. They are both cohort 1 alumni. The UndercoverVC network is kind of a sleeper network, but pretty broad.
Yeah.
So we don't have the Twitter skills and clout that like ODC or something has. We're out there. But anyway, so getting to the end here, we're in the home stretch. Undercover, midway through the first cohort, one of the earliest fund partnerships we built was with Atento Capital in Tulsa. They were, kind of one of our best and closest partners. That if we were strapped for a guest or somebody canceled or something, we could always call them and say, hey, do you have somebody who can help us with this? And they can always make it happen. And I got on a call with Mike, who's the managing partner at Atento, probably, when would it have been? Like fall of 20, probably October, November of 2020. And it wouldn't have been that early. That would have been like January 2020. I'm not sure. Sometime in late 2020, early 2021. Doesn't matter that much. Got on a call and he said, hey, I love this fellowship program, this concept you built out. Come build one for me that's Atento specific, and we'll invest in these students directly. And I said, sounds great. Do you want me to drop out and move to Tulsa? Like, what's the plan here? And he was like, I don't know about all that. Why don't we'd like you to finish school, but why don't you come intern for us next summer and let's see what we can make happen. So I joined Atento at the beginning of last summer and leading what was initially called the UIF, University Investment Fellowship Program, that Danny is an alumni of. One of the first things I did was to rebrand it to the Atento Fellows Program, just so we could operate a little broader and cleaner. And I've led that through the last year or so, almost a year now. And it is all building up to our big climax event of Tulsa Startup Weekend that'll be happening in Tulsa, April 14th through 17th.
And announce the event coming up as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, that's the story thus far. I know that was what, like 20 minutes right there, something crazy, but
it was only 16.
16. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
but no, I'm kidding. But anyways, awesome to see, even though you've had like 3 years in college, that you've had a lot of experience and made a lot of stuff happen, even though early on. It was like really impressive. And for me, that had been part of Undercover VC for the past year, and really see how that network effect of like just working with students in different schools that have like similar goals really is one of the most important parts of the program. And just getting that exposure to doing the communication with the funds is definitely like an organization that is helping students a lot to like really break into VC and really understand what it is. So great job on that.
I appreciate it.
I
Thank you.
felt it in my skin, so it's really cool to see it. So another question that we had is, throughout the creation of Undercover VC and a lot of your professional experience, what is the biggest lesson you have taken with the creation and like the development of Undercover VC?
Yeah. There's lots of good ones. Let's see what would be useful. I think so. This is not unique advice, but I think sales and storytelling are what everything comes down to. Everything. I think a lot of people get way too caught up, particularly people in the finance and CS worlds that I'm in, get way too caught up in the numbers, what the numbers say, and what the data says.
Yeah.
Data's not worth very much if you can't tell a story with it, or if it does not tell a story of its own. You know, when I was, you know, and you kind of see how these building blocks build. So with CovIntern, one of the cool things I got to do again was these like media interviews with, you know, organizations that want to talk about what I built, which I had to learn very quick, you know, how to do well, how to tell that story in a way that was interesting, that was succinct enough, that portrayed me in a good light, you know, and told a full story. And that was a great crash course in that kind of storytelling. But then when I go and get on, when I was building Undercover, when I get on these calls with investors and say, hey, we'd love you to be an entrepreneurial partner. And then I tell them this whole story of, you know, well, I tried to go and join so-and-so and weren't really receptive, but I realized that, you know, and kind of the story I just told you, that if I said, hey, will you be a partner to my student organization? We connect students and venture, you know, whatever, and left it there. That's not a very compelling pitch. But if I can tell you the whole story and lead you on, hey, this is the journey thus far. This is where we want you to hop on the bus and come with us. That's a very compelling pitch. And so I have not gotten on I've only had one sales call for building Undercover VC partnerships that did not lead to a positive outcome. But that one I just really screwed up. Don't want to talk about it here. But
Respect
That's
that.
an impressive stat, though. Yeah.
But aside from that, you know, if you can be a good storyteller, you will be a good salesman. And you know, I think people get really caught up in the hard skills of business when sales and networking will get you 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
And if you can do those things, you can find somebody else with the hard technical skills that wants to come in and do that part.
Totally. Yeah, no, that's a super interesting lesson. And it's, I mean, at the end of the day, you always have to be able to at least sell yourself. So I feel like that's such an important lesson. Totally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you share a lot of incredible, I think, knowledge and wisdom, especially from somebody who's so young. I have to say, I personally appreciate just seeing people like you who are in similar positions as myself. Like, you're still studying, you're still working towards your degree, but you're also making these opportunities like beyond the classroom to have some practical experience and also have like a practical impact. You're like trailblazing, you know, for other students. And
I don't know about all that.
I'm being serious though, because like I myself have seen how easy it is to get comfortable. Just, you know, in the day-to-day, you know, you're doing homework and you're going to class and you're getting an A, and that's all there is. And there's so much more that can be taken from school, and you're an example of that. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on here and sharing that with
I
us.
appreciate it.
Before we let you go, though, you're helping these young students who have these great ideas along the process of finding funding. But I would like to know if you yourself knew that you could have one idea, but any idea you come up with, that one idea, it will be funded for certain. What is the craziest idea that you would bring to investors?
Oh Lord. I should have read your prep sheet closer. Let's see. I don't know. I think, yeah, if you could have anything funded, probably. I don't know. I would take something on Earth, and do like X for space. So I think there are cool companies in the space that require like a ridiculous amount of funding, and somebody who's in it for like the 25 to 30 year long haul as an investor, which is very unusual. But you know, there's a company in Miami that's doing factories in space. I was thinking, like, without gravity, we could manufacture things cheaper. You know, and we're not constrained by space and 2 dimensions, where we've got 3 dimensions to work with as we build these manufacturing facilities. I think that makes a ton of sense. That's something I think is definitely going to happen, because it solves so many other problems in the process of, you know, if you can get the rocket launch cheap enough, if you can get the transportation to and from space cheap enough, manufacturing in space is probably cheaper, because it's probably all automated. There's no gravity to contend with, and you can do it in 3 dimensions. And there's no pollution to worry about in the atmosphere on Earth. There's no, like, you know, labor issues, human rights issues to think about as you try to produce things cheaply. It seems like a more ethical and cheaper solution, which are not always super common. Anyway, I think I'd do something similar to that. I know of another startup that's building gas stations for satellites. It's like, currently we shoot up satellites and they orbit for a while, and then unless, you know, if you go and refuel them, which we do for like the Hubble and like big, you know, the space station and like imported things that we want to keep in it, they just kind of burn up after a while as their orbit slowly decays back into Earth. So I know one startup that's building gas stations where the satellite would go to the gas station, get filled up, and then could resume its orbit. I don't know. Again, I don't know what the specific thing is, but that's the area I'd be looking, is to take, you know, maybe it's agriculture in space, or you know, or something of the sort, some fundamental need of mankind that we can do cheaper and more ethically in space. Requires a lot of money, so if I could fund anything, that's where it's spend it.
I like it. I like the vision.
Yeah.
The space is definitely one of the most like capital intensive markets that there is, because you got to get there. So as we wrap up over here, I wanted you to have a space just to share your socials, and also if you want to go ahead and just talk a little bit about Dosa Startup Weekend, you go ahead, and then we are good.
Sure. Well, I don't know. So my socials are Wade Fletcher everywhere. There's not a single post on my Instagram, and I tweet maybe once a month. So if those are of interest to you, have fun, but not a lot of value there. I also have wadefletcher.com. That's got maybe a little more value, but also hasn't been updated in a million years. But I would love for all of you, since I assume where are a lot of your watchers, listeners, readers located?
So we have a lot in Oklahoma, just mainly because of the the strategic location we're currently at. But we have students like all across the U.S.
Okay, wonderful. So if you're in Oklahoma already, or if you're elsewhere, but it's a little more expensive, that's Tulsa Startup Weekend is happening April 14th through 17th, hosted by Atento Capital and led by me. It's all organized around this Atento Capital's University Pitch Competition, which we do every year. We'll be giving away $10,000, $5,000, and $2,500 to student founders that are flying in from, it originally was around the country, now it's actually like around North America to come pitch, which is super cool. We've got two teams from Canada, and then we've partnered with CVN, the College Ventures Network, to put together a weekend of events around that, hosted by students, for students, with some institutional help from Atento. So, for example, that's what I've been on calls all afternoon setting these events up, and we're doing I think we're doing, so Success at Breakfast is being hosted by Crescent Fund from Southern California, talking about student founder success stories. That Crescent Fund's experience raising the funds, that'll be just a breakfast of a bunch of people that get together and eat breakfast and talk about these things together. At the same time, Tiger Ventures is doing blockchain at breakfast, which is people getting together to talk blockchain and crypto. Kodiak Ventures out of WashU is hosting student venture operations show and tell, where we'll have a bunch of student funds and student accelerators come in, and this is our Airtable that we use, and this is how we use Zapier, whatever else, talk about how they do operations. Brew CBN will have Delian Asparov doing a talk of some sort. We've got Greg Castle from Interact VC giving a keynote at the pitch competition. So anyway, we've got a lot of stuff happening at Tulsa that weekend for students, by students. We're flying in about 25 people, I think a few more than 25 people, 25 to 30 people from around the country, that are our finalists and fellows and stuff that'll be there. And then anybody else who's in town and wants to be a part is more than welcome. If you're in Tulsa already, you have a place to stay in Tulsa. It's virtually free. There's no cost to any of our events. If you need to travel in, then we'll be giving away roughly 20 $500 scholarships for travel costs. You can book your travel and everything. When you arrive, part of your check-in will give you a $500 check to cover those costs. You can apply for that and indicate your interest for the weekend broadly at tulsastartupweekend.com/go. tulsastartupweekend.com is also where you'll find the schedule as the event gets closer. And please also follow at Tulsa SW on Twitter. We'll be announcing the 7 finalists for that pitch competition today or tomorrow, and then announcing some of these events that I've kind of teased here over the next week or so. And, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm very excited about it, and I look forward to hopefully seeing some of your listeners there.
Yeah, totally. Here, as we come to an end, I just wanted to thank you one more time, Wade. It's great having this conversation here in the M&G platform. We've talked a lot through Undercover and just outside of the organization, but it's great hosting you here and having one of my good friends talk about his exciting career so far and about Undercover. So thank you so much. And this was the 3rd Project Spotlight interview.
Great. Thanks, everybody.